Yeah, I'm Jon Monsalve. I'm the project director here at Brooklyn Justice Initiatives, which is a demonstration project of the Center for Court Innovation. And Brooklyn Justice Initiatives, we also affectionately refer to it as BJI, oversees a host of alternative to incarceration program areas, as well as pretrial detention services here in the borough of Brooklyn in Kings County, New York. For us, look, we have here at BJI, we have a staff of about 80. It's a combination of what we would call clinical staff. And so our case managers, social workers, resource coordinators, folks that are actually in the courtroom receiving mandates, and then support staff, our administrative staff. In the beginning of COVID, right around March, we worked really hard to transition our staff and all of our work to remote services, really over the course of 2 days. For about 80 staff, that was a lot of hard work, and it was tough. Just making sure that our staff were safe, getting them the tech that they needed to do this work from a remote posture, and closing up our offices. We are located in the centralized criminal courthouse. Was a tall order, and so I'd really say from March to May, we were moving everything to remote, getting that equipment, but also doing wellness checks for our staff and participants. It was a time where there was not a lot of information about the impacts of this virus. Unfortunately for us here in the Northeast of the United States, we were seeing high rates of infection. Folks were dying at high rates as well. And so it was a time of concern where we were just checking in on our staff and our participants and trying to adapt to the new normal. I'd say from May onward, we really started to take a more of a long-term approach to the situation. We were adapting to that remote work and starting to develop protocols and procedures. Things like getting cell phones to our participants became vital. That is a resource that can connect them to the world at a time where our state was being asked to shelter in place. And so it was in many ways, the cell phone was a lifeline, to stay in compliance, and also to the world to get access to information, and hopefully to use for us to be able to support that individual in any way that we could. We also started to try to move some of our workshops to a virtual landscape where we can provide more supportive services, and a more kind of a bigger menu of services to individuals we were supporting in the community. And then lastly, working with community members. From the start of this to now, it's been an ever-changing landscape on who's open, who can accept walk-ins, who's providing a remote support at this time. And that's a constant effort that we've been undertaking since March, is trying to figure out where the services are so that we can get those referrals to our participants. That's something that we've been thinking about a lot in terms of the impact COVID-19 has had on our participants. I'd say the first thing is accessibility. For a long time, our participants have known they can come to our offices and see us whenever they'd like. That's gone, obviously, and it's not something that we've been able to do. It's now a phone call. And that's really a big shift. There are some participants that are looking forward to that face-to-face interaction with their social worker or their case manager. There are some participants who may want to see their social worker that day, and that's taken some time to become okay with that adjustment. I'd also just say gatherings in general are a lot harder. A lot of the work that we did in group settings has just been harder to transition over to virtual workshops. We now find ourselves assessing for things like, do you have access to the internet? Do you have access to speak to us in a private place? Those are things that are very important. We were providing that in the physical location before. I think the biggest thing we've learned and the impact that it's had is these platforms that we use, like Zoom and other platforms, were not designed for this type of engagement. And so oftentimes what we find ourselves is, trying to fill in those gaps. And we've been doing that the best we can, but I'd really say the biggest impact it's had is accessibility and that face-to-face contact with an individual, which all had to move to remote. And it's been a learning curve for us, for sure. I'd say the virtual check-ins with folks are one big piece of the innovation. For our pretrial services program, just as an example, it used to be before COVID a combination of phone check-ins and in-person check-ins. Obviously, the in-person check-ins have not been something we've been able to do since March, and so we've transitioned that all to virtual. I think that is an innovation. We had to do away with the in-person check-in, but that extra virtual check-in has forced us to adapt to see how we can continue to create and structure those spaces. I named this before, but I want to name it again. The power of the cell phone has been an innovation for us as well. Getting cell phones to individuals that are being released is key. That is something that will allow them to connect to the world. But one of the things that happened for us in July was that virtual arraignments started up again. And so here in the United States, arraignments, particularly here in New York City, we're making a decision of whether there's going to be bail, or this case is going to have bail set on it. If the case doesn't have bail set, our pretrial services get to spring into action and support that individual. But what we realized when we started virtual arraignments in July was that we were able to provide those services remotely, but who was going to be in person to hand off that cell phone? And that's really where we started to lean on our community partners and figure out ways to ship cell phones to individuals as well. Because if you're being released and the mandate is to stay in contact with us, but you don't have a cell phone, we're really setting you up to fail. And so really trying to innovate and find ways to get cell phones to people when we really shouldn't be meeting face to face with anyone. And so using our mail service, leveraging our existing partners, and connecting with the community more. I'll also say, one of the things that has been high on my mind is what lessons can we learn right now? I think it would be a huge disservice for us to try to go back to business as usual. We have been doing this remote work now since March in a very different capacity, and I'm now invested in trying to figure out where are we having successes and maybe where are we not succeeding as much. What we do know right now is that we have been meeting the needs of folks since March in this virtual posture, and that obviously provides us with a wealth of data which we're digging through to try to figure out when things do go back to normal, or when COVID-19 is under control a bit more, how do we adapt to the new world, and were there any lessons learned? As I mentioned before, it would just simply be a huge disservice for us to, be in a waiting pattern and hope to get back to business as usual when this subsides a bit. It's going to be important for us to try to stick to some of the changes we've made. Do we want that type of traffic in our offices? Are there folks that are better served in their community outside of our office spaces? Are there folks that are better served virtually? What we're finding right now is that youth are interested in engaging with us virtually and through virtual groups. What does that look like, and how do we structure it? I think the changes that should stick for us is continuing to use the virtual platform as an option and have it complement our work, not necessarily have it be, the thing that we're using right now because we have no other choice. Technology and the virtual nature of the work that we're doing, we can adapt those things to make us more efficient, and more importantly, have better connections with folks. Here in Brooklyn, for example, the downtown courthouse and our offices exist in the downtown centralized business hub of our borough. Most of our participants do not live in the neighborhood where we exist. And so, we can potentially reduce travel time. We can reduce costs of travel as well. Those are things that we need to take a look at, and we should stick to those changes in order to provide a better service to the public. Because at the end of the day, I think what this situation has exposed is that there is a different way to do this work. And that you can connect with individuals in a meaningful way. It's about quantifying at this point, and after the pandemic ends, where have we had success, and where can we continue to improve on that success so that we're meeting the needs of folks in a more appropriate way. I think it's tough to answer that question. We have been thinking a lot about, if we can provide emergency in-person services. I think like much of the rest of the world, we are seeing different spikes in the virus and hotspots emerge in different neighborhoods here in the city. more importantly in the country as well. And so what has emerged for us is, to try to be patient and to try to see what each, different week and different month is giving us, not to get ahead of ourselves. And, we don't want to ignore the data. We don't want to try to plow forward and open our doors when the data is telling us that infections are on the rise. And so in terms of the next 6 to 12 months, is continue to be patient and continue to use that data and leverage that data and remain flexible. And I think that comes down to trying to institutionalize some of the virtual work that we are doing. If we can take a more long-term approach and really start to think about our work as, how are we going to implement this permanently in the way that we do our work? I think it can make the next 6 to 12 months innovative ones for us and not necessarily ones where we're in a holding pattern. So that's what the hope is for me, is if we can institutionalize some of that and take that long-term approach, we're going to be ahead of the game, so to speak, in getting things moving for when this pandemic does end. And again, just appropriately meeting the needs of individuals with the lessons we've learned thus far. I think it would be, the last thing I'd like to add here is just hopefully a theme that I've been able to strike with the other questions, and that's around, the disservice that we would be doing the public and our participants if we tried to go back to business as usual. To kind of close this out, a lot of lessons have been learned in a lot of difficult ways and in a lot of natural ways as well. And if we don't take stock of those or kind of file them under, yeah, but that was during the pandemic and now things are different, I think we're going to be doing ourselves a disservice. Leveraging technology and bringing technology into the criminal justice world in ways that we've never seen before, I can understand can cause maybe some anxiety or some stress for folks. But more importantly, right now, is also figuring out, can that technology be a lifeline for someone? Is that support going to be something that's going to have a huge impact on an individual's case or a trajectory of an individual's life? And so, one of the things that we're really focused on right now is to make sure that we are providing that appropriate support. And if we can do that in a virtual posture and learn from that, I think that we are going to be better off as a criminal justice sector here in the United States and hopefully internationally as well.